Florida property tax relief just passed the Florida House and Senate, and the headline sounds huge: a $250,000 homestead exemption. But before you celebrate, you need to understand the fine print. This is not a $250,000 back in your pocket. It does not eliminate the full property tax bill. It does not apply to school taxes, and it's not the 10-year phase-out many homeowners thought was coming. So is this real tax relief, or is it a disappointment compared to what people expected? That's what we're breaking down today. I'm George Latos with Zackos Realty here in Lakewood Ranch, Florida, and I help buyers, sellers, investors, and people relocating to Florida understand the real costs of owning property in Sarasota and Manatee County. And before we get started, make sure you subscribe to the channel. This issue is still developing, and I'll continue breaking it down and what really matters to Florida homeowners and buyers. Because in Florida real estate, the headline is almost never the whole story. The Florida legislature passed a proposed constitutional amendment that will now go to the voters on November 2026 ballot. That means nothing changes automatically today. For this to become tax law, voters need to approve it with at least 60% support. If voters approve it, the homestead exemption for certain property taxes would increase in two steps. In 2027, it would increase to $150,000, and in 2028, it would increase to $250,000. But there's a key point. Florida homeowners already have a $50,000 homestead exemption. So this is not a brand new $250,000 benefit starting from zero. The actual added benefit would only be $100,000 more in 2027 and $100,000 more in 2028. By 2028, that's $200,000 of additional exemption compared to today. That is meaningful, but it is not the same as eliminating property taxes. And it is not the same as the 10-year phase-out many people thought was coming. Earlier proposals talked about increasing the homestead exemption by $100,000 per year for 10 years with the idea that homesteaded property could eventually be exempt from non-school property taxes. That version did not pass. What passed is a two-step increase. And that is why some people may seem very disappointed. Now, another major detail is the December 31, 2026 cutoff date. There appears to be a difference between people who are already in Florida and by 2026 and people who become Florida residents after that date. If you're already a Florida resident by that date, you may already be eligible for the enhanced exemption sooner if voters approve the amendment. But if you move to Florida after that date, the full benefit may not be immediate. New Florida residents may only receive the standard $50,000 homestead exemption for several years before becoming eligible for the larger $250,000 exemption. So if you're relocating from New York, New Jersey, California, Illinois, or another state, this is one of the biggest details to understand. The headline says property tax relief, but the timing of when you become a Florida resident could affect when the actual benefit occurs. So that doesn't mean you should rush into buying a home just because of this proposal. It still has to pass in 2026. But if you are already planning to move to Florida, that date could be very important. Now, let's talk about seniors. There was an earlier discussion about a special property tax relief for homeowners age 65 and over. And that would have been a major benefit for retirees. But that senior-specific proposal does not appear to be in the version that passed. Seniors still benefit if they're a Florida homesteaded resident, but not getting a separate senior-only exemption under this version. That's another reason why this feels more limited than what people expected. Now, let's talk about who benefits most. A $250,000 exemption does not help every homeowner equally. The biggest percentage goes to the lower and middle-priced homesteaded homes. Why? Because $250,000 is a much larger percentage of $300,000, $400,000, or a $600,000 home than it is of a $1.6 million home. For example, on a $600,000 home, the full $250,000 represents 42% of the home's value. The added $200,000 benefit compared to today represents about 33% of the home's value. On a $1.6 million home, the $250,000 exemption represents 16% of the home's value. The added $200,000 benefit compared to today represents only about 12.5%. So the higher end homeowners may still get the benefit, but the relative impact is much smaller. The savings are capped. The benefit does not keep growing because the home is more expensive. That's why the proposal seems more powerful for lower middle-priced homesteaded homes than it is for luxury properties. Let's use a simple example. On a $600,000 home, if property taxes are roughly 1.1 to 1.5%, the total annual bill might be $6,600 to $9,000. In 2027, the added $100,000 represents about $1,100 to $1,500 in taxable compared before adjusting for school. But because the school taxes are excluded, the annual savings would likely be lower. A rough realistic range might be around $550 to $975 a year, depending on the local tax structure. In 2028, with the added $200,000 compared to today, savings would be roughly $1,100 to $1,950 a year after adjusting for school tax. That is helpful. It could offset insurance increases. It could offset HOA increases, but it does not make the home tax-free. Now compare that to a $1.6 million home. The possible dollar savings might be similar because the exemption is capped, but the overall tax bill would still be much larger. That homeowner may still have higher taxes, higher insurance, higher maintenance and higher HOA fees, and possibly CDD fees. So the higher price point, the less dramatic the benefit becomes as a percentage of the total cost of ownership. Now, what about rental properties and investors? The big $150,000 to $250,000 exemption is a homestead exemption. That means it applies only to primary residences. It does not apply to rental properties, second homes, or investment properties. And there's another part of the proposal that could help non-homestead properties. The annual assessment cap on non-homestead properties would be reduced from 10% to 5%. And that can help slow how quickly taxable values rise on rental properties, second homes, and commercial properties. But it's not the same as a major tax cut. And it's more of a tax increase limiter. For investors, the numbers still need to work based on today's realities. Property taxes, insurance, HOA fees, CDD fees, maintenance fees, vacancy, which is so important today, rental income, and financing costs. This proposal may help with predictability, but it does not make a bad investment suddenly work. So here is the final takeaway. This proposal may help many Florida homeowners. For existing homestead owners, especially those in lower and middle-priced homes, it could be meaningful if the voters approve it. But it's the major 10-year phase-out many people were looking for? No. And that's where the disappointment really comes in. The headline sounds huge, a $250,000 homestead exemption, but the reality is much more limited. It's really an additional $100,000 in 2027 and another $100,000 in 2028, and it only applies to non-school portion of the tax bill. It still requires voter approval. The December 31, 2026 residency date may matter. New Florida residents may have to wait several years. Rental properties do not get the big homestead exemption, and the senior-specific relief many people heard about does not appear to be part of the final version. So my advice is simple. Plan based on today's numbers. If you're buying in Florida, make sure you understand your projected property taxes, insurance, HOA fees, CDD fees, and total monthly costs before you buy. If future tax relief happens, great. Treat it as a bonus, but do not make it the reason the deal works. I'm George Latos with Zachos Realty here in Lakewood Ranch, Florida. And if you're thinking about buying, selling, investing, or relocating to Sarasota or Manatee County, reach out to me. I'll help you understand the real numbers before you make the move. And if this video helped you understand the difference between the headline and the fine print, do me a favor. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, and leave a comment below. Do you think this is real property tax relief, or is it disappointment compared to what people were expecting? I'll be following the issue closely as it moves through the November 2026 ballot, and I'll keep breaking it down for what it means to Florida homeowners, buyers, retirees, and investors. Because when it comes to Florida, the numbers really matter, and the fine print matters even more.